The seaside wind whispered through the worn slats of the patio deck, carrying the scent of salt and grilled haddock to the solitary figure hunched at the far corner table. Jack Miller, 62, and hollowed by grief, moved his fork with military precision, cutting his fish in silence as waves crashed methodically below. The world, once vibrant with family chatter and weekend plans, had shrunk to routines and empty rituals. He had not spoken a word all day, not to the waitress, not to the sea, not to himself. Then a shadow shifted beneath the wooden deck, subtle but deliberate. A thin, mud-streaked German shepherd emerged with a slow, tactical grace. Not the awkward skittishness of a feral stray, but the calculating low crawl of something trained, something once disciplined and proud. Its amber eyes, sharp with hunger but sharper with intent, locked on Jack's plate. The ribs showed through its dull coat, but it moved with measured restraint. Jack didn't move. Instead, he watched. Something in the animal's demeanor, its awareness, its silence, the way it didn't beg, triggered muscle memory buried deep under layers of loss. "You've had training," he murmured aloud, the words surprising even himself. The dog froze, gaze flicking to Jack's face. A beat passed, then another. Jack nudged his plate closer to the edge of the table and looked away. Only then did the shepherd approach. No sound. One swift motion. A piece of fish vanished. And so did the dog. Jack didn't return to his meal. He stared at the gap beneath the deck, heart unexpectedly stirred. Minutes later, the dog reappeared and took another portion with the same surgical efficiency. This time, Jack followed. He tracked the dog across gravel and dusk, to the rusting ruins of the Hemingway Boat Works, a condemned building with a demolition sign and chain-link fence. The shepherd slipped through a pried gap. Jack hesitated for just a breath, then ducked in. Behind the smaller storage building, on a nest of boat tarps, lay a pregnant female shepherd and a one-eared yellow tabby, curled into one another like survivors, clinging to the last safe corner of a ruined world. The male placed the fish before them, then positioned himself, silent, protective, between his family and the man who had just stepped into their fading sanctuary. Jack's breath caught. Something inside him stirred for the first time in months. The nest of tarps was little more than layered decay, torn canvas, damp salt-stained cloth, the ghosts of 100 storms. But to the three creatures huddled there, it was home. The pregnant shepherd shifted her weight with effort, her swollen belly tight with life. The cat, golden with one tattered ear, stood as lookout, tail flicking with unspoken suspicion. And the male, the one who had stolen Jack's dinner, watched with the posture of a soldier guarding a perimeter. 10 days. Jack had glimpsed the notice nailed crooked on the side of the main building. Demolition scheduled. 10 days until the walls came down. 10 days until this makeshift sanctuary was gone. He didn't sleep that night. The fire came back, as it always did in his dreams. Sarah's laughter lost to smoke. Emma's bedroom door never opening. But this time, it wasn't flames that woke him. It was purpose. He rose before dawn, dressed without thinking, and packed leftover roast chicken into a brown paper bag. Slipping through the same fence gap, Jack moved cautiously across the lot. His boots crunched on broken shells and glass. Halfway to the outbuilding, a low growl stopped him. The German shepherd stepped out from behind a stack of warped pallets, eyes glinting in the flicker of a dying security light. "Just breakfast," Jack said, crouching slowly and opening the bag. He placed the container of chicken on the ground, then backed away 15 feet and sat, palms open, body relaxed. The dog didn't move, not for 5 long minutes. Then, with the patience of something trained to survive, he padded forward, sniffed the food, and disappeared inside. Jack waited, hearing faint sounds, licks, low whimpers, the rustle of tarp. He didn't press closer. "I'll be back," he said softly to the door. And he meant it. Later that morning, Jack walked into the veterinary clinic for the first time in months. Frank Thompson looked up from examining a beagle and knew something had changed. Jack had photos, grainy, distant shots of the dogs and the cat, their small nest in the condemned shed. His voice carried a thread of urgency, almost like life. "They're survivors," he told Frank. "I don't have a plan. Just know they deserve more than to be bulldozed." And for the first time in a long while, someone listened. Frank didn't ask questions Jack couldn't answer. Instead, he opened a cabinet, gathering what he could. Flea treatments, prenatal vitamins, antibiotics, syringes. "If she's as far along as you say," Frank muttered, packing the bag. "You've got maybe a week, less if the stress gets to her." Jack left the clinic with more than medical supplies. He carried something fragile, unfamiliar, hope. That afternoon, he returned to the boathouse with canned food, clean bowls, and blankets. The gap in the fence was still there, but now he noticed a camera newly mounted on a pole above the lot. Someone had patched the fence and posted more warning signs. Malone's men were tightening control. Jack circled the perimeter until he found a weakness. An old loading dock jutting out into the harbor, hidden behind overgrown brush. Its boards creaked under his weight, but it held. He made his way to the back of the outbuilding and pried open the sliding door with a rusted crowbar. Inside, the air was thick with mildew and salt, but it held life. The shepherd growled from the shadows. Jack kept his flashlight low. "Just me," he said, lowering the supplies to the ground. "No harm." He didn't move. Sat on an overturned crate for nearly 20 minutes, while the German shepherd watched every twitch of his hand. Then, one by one, the animals approached. First the tabby, curious and unimpressed. Then the female shepherd, moving slowly, her breathing labored. Finally, the male emerged and circled Jack like a patrol, nose to boots, pants, hands. "You need names," Jack whispered. "Can't keep calling you the dog." He pointed to the male. You're a soldier. Tactical, calm under fire. I'll call you Duke." To the female. "Luna, you belong in the moonlight." The cat licked its paw, aloof and golden. "Rusty." The name stuck as the animals ate. Jack turned his attention to the structure itself. Beyond the scattered tools and moldy canvas, something caught his eye. Stacked wooden crates with faded foreign markings. He brushed aside a tarp. The boxes were empty, but the smell, oil, metal, told him what they once held. Weapons. And now, he realized, the demolition wasn't just about clearing space for condos. Something deeper, darker, was being buried. That night, Jack barely slept. Images of weapons hidden beneath floorboards collided with memories of Michael Davis, his closest friend, lost during their last deployment. Michael had worked with military dogs, one in particular, a German shepherd named Commander. In the morning light, Jack stared at the photo on his mantle. Michael, kneeling beside a young shepherd with the same proud posture, the same piercing eyes, and a distinctive marking on his right flank. It was Duke. A ripple of understanding passed through Jack's chest. If Duke was Commander, he hadn't just found food that night. He had found Jack. Jack returned to the Hemingway property armed with purpose. But the fence had been repaired, and a new surveillance camera blinked from above. Undeterred, Jack slipped through the harbor dock again, approaching the boathouse from the rear. Inside, the animals were waiting. Duke emerged first, alert, but not aggressive. Rusty leapt onto a ledge, tail twitching. Luna remained curled in her nest of tarps, panting harder than before. Jack whispered as he set down the supplies. "Frank will come today. Help's on the way." When Frank arrived by inflatable boat under the cover of mist, Duke growled low until Jack calmed him with a gesture. Inside, Frank examined Luna carefully. "She's close, 24 to 48 hours tops, but she can't do this alone. She needs a clean space, warmth, monitoring." "Can't take her to your clinic without questions," Jack said. "No," Frank agreed, "but I can bring the clinic here." As they made preparations, Jack pried open one of the suspicious crates again. This time, he found residue, grease, lint, and traces of gun oil, military grade. The crates had recently held weapons. Then came the sound of engines. 2 black SUVs pulled into the lot outside. Vincent Malone stepped out, dressed in an expensive coat that didn't belong in a demolition zone. Jack and Frank froze. They slipped out the rear water entrance with haste, carrying only what they could. From inside, they heard Malone's voice. "I don't care about the permits. The demos move to Monday. Make it happen. 5 days, not 10. Jack glanced back at the animals as the tide rose against the dock. The mission had just accelerated. And this time, it wasn't just about the dogs. It was about justice. Back at his cottage, Jack spread photos across the table. Michael Davis and Commander in uniform. A younger Duke, unmistakable. The same flank mark, the same alert stance. The more he looked, the clearer it became. Commander had survived. And he hadn't just survived. He had adapted, formed a pack, returned with evidence. Jack called Sheriff Wilson. "I found weapons at the Hemingway property," he said. "Military crates. Something's wrong with this whole demolition." The sheriff's voice tightened. "Malone filed a trespassing complaint this morning. He's escalating. You're on his radar now." That evening, when Jack returned to check on the animals, he found more than increased surveillance. The crates in the boathouse weren't all empty. One, hidden beneath a trap door in the floor, still held disassembled rifle parts, oil-slicked steel nestled like sleeping vipers. He snapped photos, sent them to Wilson, and to Rebecca Chen, a local reporter he trusted more than half the officials in town. Meanwhile, Luna's breathing worsened. Her whines came more frequently, her belly shifting with the movement of unborn pups. Duke stayed close, pressing his body to hers. Rusty perched nearby, tail wrapped tight, eyes watchful. "She's going into labor soon," Jack told Frank. "We may not have time to move her." Frank nodded grimly. "Then we deliver right here." That night, the storm rolled in early. A wet gust howled off the harbor. Sheets of rain swept the coast. As planned, Jack and Frank launched from a secluded boat ramp, slipping past patrols and camera lines under cover of wind and wave. But as they reached the boathouse, it was clear they weren't alone. Work lights glowed around the main building. Bulldozers rumbled in the rain. 2 security guards stood at the edge, smoke curling from their cigarettes. Malone was using the storm as cover, just like they were. Inside, Luna panted heavily, her eyes glazed. Jack set up the emergency whelping station while Frank examined her. "We're out of time," he said. "She's in early labor. Moving her would kill her." Then came a new sound, the crunch of gravel, a flashlight beam swinging through broken windows. Jack moved to the shadows. 2 men entered, black rain gear, armed. One reached for his weapon, and Duke moved first. With a low, explosive snarl, Duke launched from the darkness, intercepting the armed guard before he could raise his pistol. Teeth sank into the man's arm. He screamed and dropped the flashlight. The second guard pivoted, but Jack was faster, crashing into him from behind and driving him to the floor. Frank shielded Luna as the chaos erupted. Rusty sprang onto a crate, hissing and arched like a sentinel of flame. "Stay down," Jack barked, zip-tying the first guard's wrists with military precision. Blood from the second glistened on the floor, but he backed toward the door, face twisted in shock. "You don't know what you're involved in," the man hissed. "Malone will bury you." Jack stared coldly. "Already tried, with Michael Davis." Recognition flickered in the man's eyes, then fear. "I found the weapons," Jack continued. "The photos are with the sheriff and a reporter. Tell Malone the game's over." The man fled. Jack barred the door with a plank. "We've got minutes before reinforcements show." Behind him, Luna whimpered. Her body arched. The first puppy was coming. Frank worked swiftly. Duke stood protectively by Luna's head, licking her face between contractions. Rusty curled beside her, a warm shield against the cold air. One tiny puppy emerged, a slick, gasping bundle. Then another, and another. Outside, flashlights danced across the walls. Malone's voice echoed. "Make sure the outbuilding's clear. We finish this tonight." "We can't run," Frank said. "She's still in labor." "Then we distract them," Jack muttered. He turned to the hidden trapdoor. From their emergency kit, he pulled a flare. As Malone's men pounded at the entrance, Jack opened the hatch, ignited the flare, and dropped it into the crate of weapons, just enough to fill the space with smoke and panic. "Fire in the hole!" he yelled. The pounding stopped. Shouts erupted. "Retreat." Jack spun to Frank. "Get Luna ready. We're going through the water route." Together, they gathered the supplies and puppies. 5 now, tiny and squeaking. Luna, despite her exhaustion, nuzzled them one by one. They moved toward the dock as the smoke billowed behind them. Malone's team would return soon, but Jack had bought them precious minutes. And Duke, commander, followed at Jack's side, eyes blazing with purpose. They weren't just running, they were completing a mission. The storm raged as Jack and Frank loaded the fragile cargo. Luna, 5 puppies, medical supplies, into the inflatable boat. Rain slashed sideways, wind battering their faces, but Jack's hands were steady on the rope. Commander took the bow like a sentinel, unflinching against the spray. Rusty nestled beside the pups, small body curled tight, a guardian in fur. They cut across the harbor in the dark, guided by flashes of lightning and Jack's deep familiarity with these waters. But behind them, another shape moved, larger, faster. Malone's boat. "We've got company," Jack called. Frank turned, his face pale in the flickering stormlight. "Can we outrun them?" "No, but I can outmaneuver." Jack veered toward the rocky shore near his cottage, avoiding the public dock. He aimed for a hidden cove where an old boathouse clung to the cliffside, a structure barely more than driftwood and memory. The boat hit the beach with a jolt. They scrambled to unload. "Another one's coming!" Frank cried, kneeling beside Luna. She was straining, trembling. She can't make the climb, Jack realized. The cottage path twisted steep and slick above them. Then he saw it. His old fishing boathouse, padlocked but intact. "There," he said. "We make our stand there." They carried Luna through the rain, shielding the newborns. Inside the cramped space, Jack broke the lock and barricaded the door with his body. Frank laid Luna on a blanket of old coats. She whimpered once, then pushed. A 6th puppy emerged. Commander stood rigid by the window, growling low. Outside, flashlights bobbed along the shore. Malone's men were close. Jack placed a hand on the dog's head. "You ready to protect your family?" Commander didn't blink. The pounding began on the door. Malone's voice, venom-laced and controlled, came through the wood. "Miller, you've stolen property. Surrender the animals and we walk away." Jack said nothing. Another blow rocked the frame. Inside, the 7th puppy came into the world. Jack knew they were out of time. He reached for the flare gun, loaded it, and climbed halfway through the narrow window. The storm peeled at his jacket, but he aimed high and fired. The flare burst red over the harbor. A mariner's call for help. A signal no authority could ignore. Jack dropped back down and faced the door. It was about to come down. The door splintered. 2 guards burst in, weapons raised. For a split second, they hesitated, frozen by the tableau before them. Frank crouched beside Luna and her 7 newborns, Rusty hissing like a wildfire, and Commander poised in front of them all, hackles high, ready to strike. Jack stood with his hands open, unarmed, calm. Then Malone stepped through the wrecked doorway, rain dripping from his expensive coat. "This isn't what I expected," he said, voice low with contempt. "Where are the crates?" "You mean the illegal weapons you were smuggling?" Jack replied. "The ones I've already reported to the sheriff and the press." Malone's eyes narrowed. "No one's coming in this storm, and you've got no proof." "You're standing in it," Jack said. "A military dog, a critical witness, and a live birth under threat. Try explaining that to Harbor Patrol." As if summoned by his words, the distant whine of a motor grew louder. Patrol boats approaching. Flashlights swept the shoreline. Malone's jaw tensed. "This isn't over," he growled. "Kill the cat if it interferes. Take the dogs. Miller had a tragic fall." The guard raised his pistol. Commander moved like lightning, lunging with lethal intent. Jack dove forward, grappling the gunman to the ground. Chaos erupted as the door flung open behind Malone, flooding the room with searchlights and shouted commands. "Harbor Patrol, drop your weapons!" Malone froze, his expression flashing from rage to calculation. In a breath, he turned and fled, his men following into the storm. Frank applied pressure to Luna's side. "She's hemorrhaging. She won't survive without surgery." Jack's heart pounded. "We've got transport now." "No," Frank said. "Not without consequences. If we tell them everything, they'll seize the animals, investigate, delay her care. She won't make it." Jack stood still for a moment, soaked to the bone, staring at the life slipping away in front of him. Then he said quietly but firmly, "We tell the truth." 10 minutes later, they sat aboard the harbor patrol boat, heading toward the docks. Luna lay wrapped in blankets, her puppies nestled around her. Commander stood vigil. Rusty never left her side. Jack knew what he was sacrificing, knew Malone's reach, the danger ahead. But he also knew one thing: sometimes a mission matters more than survival. Sheriff Wilson waited at the dock, his silhouette barely visible in the stormlight. As Jack stepped off the patrol boat, soaked and exhausted, Wilson said only 2 words: "Follow me." At the station, they sat in a private room. Jack gave a full statement about the dogs, the weapons, the flare, Malone's threat. He handed over photographs, evidence, names. Wilson listened without interruption, face unreadable. "Place was empty when we got there," the sheriff finally said. "Cleaned out. Whatever Malone had is gone." But Jack had something else. From a sealed bag, Wilson pulled out 2 items found on the male shepherd during examination: a weathered military tag and a small metal capsule. The tag read, CDR 5593M, Handler, M. Davis, USMC. Jack swallowed. "Commander." Wilson nodded. "And this?" He opened the capsule to reveal a military-grade USB drive. "Standard issue for covert operations. We haven't accessed it yet. Thought you should be here." They loaded the drive into a secure terminal. Folders opened, encrypted files, images, audio clips, and a video. Jack clicked play. Michael Davis appeared on screen, young and serious. His voice was calm, but the tension sat heavy beneath it. "If you're watching this, Jack, Commander made it back. Something's wrong with this op. The intel doesn't match what we're seeing. These weapons, they're being redirected, laundered. One of the names involved is Vincent Malone." Jack felt the breath leave his lungs. Michael's final message was clear. There was a leak, a mole. He named names. He documented the route, and he gave only one order: get the data to Naval Intelligence. Only to a man named Thomas Reynolds. The screen faded to black. Jack sat frozen, fingers tight around the edge of the desk. Wilson broke the silence. "This is your missions now. Malone tried to erase it all. Michael, the dog, the data, but Commander found you. And now I finish what Michael started," Jack said, voice steady. The next morning, Wilson brought Jack to the veterinary clinic. Luna had survived the surgery, pale but breathing. Her puppies lay nestled in a warming bed beside her. Commander stood guard. Rusty, perched above them all, watched like a general with his troops. Jack reached out, fingers brushing the German shepherd's worn coat. "You did it," he whispered. "You brought him home." Frank stood by the incubator, watching the 7 tiny pups twitch in their sleep. "She made it through the night," he said softly. "Barely, but she's strong." Jack looked down at Luna, curled protectively around her newborns despite the bandages and the IV line. Her eyes fluttered open as if recognizing the voice that never left her side. Commander remained close, his body draped half between her and the room's only door. Even now, he was guarding a perimeter. Sheriff Wilson entered quietly. In his hands, he carried a sealed bag containing a cleaned and laminated version of Commander's military ID tag. He passed it to Jack, along with a second envelope, official documentation from the Marine Corps, acknowledging Commander's survival and mission completion. "There's more," Wilson said. "Michael's emergency contact was still listed as you. That means everything Commander carried, including the drive, is officially yours." Jack blinked. And the weapons cache? Without the crates in place, Malone thinks he has the upper hand again. But the data changes that. Rebecca Chen already ran her first article. She's digging deeper. Malone's connections are unraveling. Frank stepped in. And we're not done here either. He pulled out another envelope. This one from a federal grant agency. You're looking at the first approved site for the Second Chance Command Program, Frank said. Rehabilitation and rehoming for retired military dogs. Commander's legacy. Jack held the paperwork, speechless. The Hemingway property, the very place this had all started, was now signed over for the program. What was once a ruin set to be buried under condos would become a sanctuary. They gave it to us? He finally asked. To them, Wilson corrected, nodding toward Luna, the pups, and the dog who had carried a mission across 3 years and a continent. Rusty meowed once from the counter. Jack chuckled. All of them. Outside, the first sunlight broke across harbor view, glinting off the harbor and stretching into the renovated fields where a new fence would rise, a new home, a new beginning. Jack looked back at Commander. You found me for a reason. You saved more than this mission. Commander moved forward, pressing his head gently against Jack's chest. And Jack, for the first time in 6 months, allowed himself to feel what had been buried. Hope. 3 months later, the sun rose over the newly christened Second Chance Command Facility, formerly the Hemingway Boathouse, now reborn. Puppies tumbled through the fenced yard, their coats healthy and eyes bright. Each one bore a name that honored a legacy. Michael, Liberty, Scout, Valor, Honor, Courage, and Grace. Jack stood on his porch, coffee in hand, watching Commander supervise the morning chaos with regal calm. Luna emerged from the boathouse with a slight limp, her strength returning day by day. Rusty had claimed the railing as his personal command post, overseeing his unconventional pack with lazy dignity. Inside the house, an envelope rested on the table, formal commendation for Commander's service and a posthumous promotion for Michael Davis. Attached was final confirmation. Jack's program had received full federal approval. What started with a stolen piece of fish had become a national model for service dog rehabilitation. Sheriff Wilson arrived with a manila folder in hand. Final decision on the Hemingway property, he announced. Court approved the forfeiture. And based on your role in Malone's arrest and Commander's mission, it's yours. Officially. Jack opened the folder. The deed bore his name, but he shook his head. It's not mine, he said. It's theirs. Wilson gave a rare smile. Frank joined them on the porch, his boots crunching over the gravel. The first graduating class, he joked, nodding toward the pups. And Michael's legacy, all right there. One of the puppies, a male with Commander's identical flank markings, stumbled forward and barked. On his chest, a white star had formed in his fur. Jack knelt, scooping the pup into his arms. This one, he whispered. This one's Michael. A hush fell over the porch. Even Rusty paused mid-groom, as if honoring the moment. Commander approached, touching noses with his son, then pressing against Jack's leg with silent approval. Together they turned toward the sea, toward the place where a mission had been buried in grief, and then reborn in purpose. The Harborview Gazette headline said it all. Malone sentenced, 20 years for arms trafficking and conspiracy. Below it, a photograph showed Malone in handcuffs, his once smug confidence erased beneath courtroom lights. Smaller headlines documented the unraveling. Corrupt officials exposed, offshore accounts frozen, and a web of deceit destroyed by a dog, a soldier, and a mission that refused to die. Jack folded the paper and set it beside Luna, who now lay sprawled beneath a warm patch of sun, puppies climbing over her like living memories. Rusty yawned from the porch swing, tail twitching. Commander stood beside Jack, his gaze fixed on the horizon as if still watching for threats that might come from beyond the bay. The phone rang. Jack answered it, and silence filled the line, until a calm voice said, "We've confirmed it. The fire that killed Sarah and Emma, it wasn't random." The words hit like shrapnel. The voice continued, "Malone's organization targeted you. They knew about Michael's data. They couldn't find Commander, so they tried to eliminate you instead. Jack hung up slowly. Everything he'd lost, his family, his future, had been stolen by the same operation his friend had died trying to expose. Frank joined him moments later, holding a photograph recovered from Malone's personal safe. It showed Michael Davis and Commander, taken just weeks before their final mission. Jack recognized the setting, their old forward operating base. The back was labeled in Malone's handwriting. "A trophy," Frank muttered. He kept it like a souvenir. Jack's hand clenched, but his voice was quiet. He failed. He tucked the photo into his shirt pocket, close to his heart. Commander stepped forward, pressing his body gently against Jack's leg. Luna joined him. Then Rusty. Then, one by one, the puppies. Grace curled in Jack's lap. Valor barked at a passing gull. And Michael, the pup, lay against his father's paw, safe. Jack looked around at what they had built. A home forged from loss. A mission reborn through instinct and loyalty. Not just survival, but legacy. "The program opens next month," Jack said, voice low with wonder. "Michael's parents are coming for the dedication." Frank nodded. From a stolen dinner to a national movement. Jack smiled, fully, deeply, without pain. Because sometimes, the smallest theft leads to the greatest redemption.